son, what you doing?
Oh, just studying some stuff for school.
Oh yeah? What kind of stuff?
Oh, I've been taking this personal income tax class from this guy named Claire at A&M. It's kind of weird, but it's a great class.
April 15th is coming up real soon. You mind showing me some of the stuff you're learning?
Yeah, Dad, I've been learning a lot about deductions and what are tax rates and everything, so I'd be more than happy to show you. Let me show you this PowerPoint presentation we learned about in class today.
Awesome, maybe that'll help me. I really need some help filing my tax return.
I hear you, Dad. It's always a problem. So first things first, there's something called deductions, which basically once you calculate your gross income from your employment activities and other non-employment related activities, there are various expenses that are used to reduce this gross income in order to calculate your taxable income. And there's two different types of deductions. There's itemized and there's standard deductions.
What's the difference between the two?
Okay, so basically an itemized deduction is a specific expense incurred during the year that the government allows you to quote-unquote write off. And
what does write-off mean?
Well, basically, it's if I said I'm going to use an expense to my tax return and I'm going to write it off, that's actually using the expense. It's the process of using that expense, writing it off.
Okay.
Okay, and here's a list of all the different types of itemized deductions that you can use: medical expenses, taxes, interest, etc. The problem with these is you have to keep track of them accurately in order to write them off, and so it's difficult to keep track of all these different expenses.
Yeah.
Now, standard deductions are a little bit different than itemized deduction. An itemized, you have to keep track of things, and it varies by taxpayer, but a standard deduction is a fixed amount set by the government. It varies between filing statuses, which we'll discuss later, but it's typically the same amount per filing status.
Okay.
Okay, so as I just mentioned, the standard deduction varies by filing statuses. So basically what those are is a designation by each taxpayer as a certain status. And this allows the government to assist individuals with different lifestyles and tax burdens, such as a single parent or just a single person with no children.
Okay, are there a bunch of different types of statuses?
There are. The different types of filing statuses are mentioned here: single, married filing jointly, married filing separately, head of household, and qualifying widow. Now, for instance, you and Mom would qualify as a married filing jointly, and that allows you to have a deduction that's typically higher than a single person because you typically have more expenses with children and two incomes.
What if we were married and filed separately?
So basically that means that you are married, but you don't want to file together. So you file two separate returns and you get a lesser deduction because of that. So it's typically not a good filing status.
I saw on the statuses that there was a widow or widower with a dependent. Can you tell me what a dependent is?
Yeah, so basically a dependent is someone like me or a child that's living with you, and you get to use, since you're paying for most of their stuff and they're living with you, you're allowed to use what's called a dependency exemption for them. So it's another type of deduction that decreases your income and thus decreases your tax liability. And there's certain requirements that you have to meet in order to meet a dependency status.
Okay.
Okay, so as I mentioned, there's certain tests and requirements that a dependent has to meet in order to be qualified as a dependent. And essentially what it is they must be related to you, younger than 19, lived with the taxpayer or you for at least half of the year, and they must have relied on your income substantially. And there's also tests for people that don't qualify as relatives, that can be just a cousin or a friend of some sort that's living in your house and depending on you, but that's a little bit more complicated.
Do they have to fill in, or do they have to fill more than one of these, or all of them, or how does that work?
They have to meet all these requirements in order to meet a dependent status, and obviously there are variances in certain requirements, but for the most part, yes.
Okay.
So after you've taken your gross income and used all your deductions and exemptions, then you'll come up with what's called your taxable income. After you have your taxable income, in order to calculate how much tax liability you have to the government, you multiply your taxable income times your tax rate.
Okay.
Okay, and there's also different ways that the government can tax your income. Now, currently in the United States, we use what's called a graduated tax. And basically, that's the use of different brackets, and it's broken down by filing status and income levels to where different levels of your income are multiplied or taxed at different rates. Now, there's also been discussions in the United States to adopt what's called a flat tax, which basically means it doesn't matter what income amount or filing status you are, your income is taxed at a certain rate.
Okay, and as far as the graduated tax goes, if I was earning the top amount in the 10% rate, if I was to earn another $5,000 more, would all of my income be taxed in a 15% rate, or how does that work?
No, the amount that's on the 10% bracket. So, for instance, if you're married filing jointly, that first about $16,000 would be taxed at the 10% rate, and then the extra income, the $5,000, would be taxed at the 15% rate. So that initial $16,000 still is taxed at the lower rate. So if you can make the additional money, you want to, because you'll still be earning more money.
Okay, great. That makes a lot more sense.
Okay, so finally, there's three different types of tax rates. The first type of tax rate is a marginal tax rate, and that's basically if you were to make an additional dollar income, what rate would it be taxed at? The second type of tax rate is an average tax rate, and that's basically taking the total amount of tax that you make over your taxable income. So you can see how much, on average, your dollar of income is being taxed at. And then finally, there's something called an effective tax rate, which is taking your total tax and putting it over your total income, so including your non-taxable income. And it's used to find how much you're getting your bang for your buck. So do you think that helped?
Yeah, a lot. A whole lot. Between you and the accountant I saw earlier, I know a lot of stuff now.
Awesome. Well, let me get back to my studies.
I appreciate it. Man, this is just so overwhelming, but now that the CBA helped me and my son helped me, I've got a clear understanding now about deductions and how I can save some money and how to file a tax rate. I even found out that, the government's willing to give me some benefits, and that I found out the correct forms to use and where to find my gross income and how to report it. I even found out I can report it online. Man, this is going to help me so much. I'm going to be able to save so much money, and my investors are just going to love it. And I'm so excited to get my new business off the ground and going.
I see the deadline coming round when the IRS is gonna tax you. They'll take your change in your pocket, don't like it, that's tough, 'cause they tax you and they tax me too. Said you would be richer if they didn't tax you. Ha! But you still gotta file it. And although each year is a mess, pay the IRS, and 'cause they tax you. Schedule C, and you need a 1040. Make up deductions if you dare. Looking for receipts, and you feel lousy. You're gonna be tearing out your hair. I pity the fool who cannot find his W-2. I had it somewhere. Well, I can't find there's no refund for you. Yeah, go run and tell your little accountant. I see you writing numbers down, 'cause the time's coming round when they tax you. Take all the cash in your pocket, still ain't enough, 'cause they tax you and they tax me too. I said if I were richer, I'd get some tax shelters, but I ain't got squat. Now we all got pains in our chest from the IRS, and 'cause they